Hello again and welcome to this episode of Mail Unleashed, brought to you by Market Reach. And in a departure from past programming, we actually have a creative session today because I'm joined by Jack Gallon. Now, with a name like Jack Gallon, you almost have to be a creative director, but Jack absolutely is a creative director. In fact, he's the creative director of MBA Stack. Your clothing, I think, gives the game away, which is, for those of you who can't see, is actually a remodeled Royal Mail bag. A mail bag from your local postie who managed to find one, if that's right.
Yeah. Well, I think that this, for me, sort of sums up what mail can be. You know, it can be something really cool, different, attention-grabbing, but it just needs that spark, that one little creative idea that takes it from being mail to something really wonderful. Yeah,
I think that's absolutely spot on. That actually, because a lot of mail is, fairly formulaic, or a lot of mail is fairly transactional, just that little surprising deviation from the norm has a particular impact, doesn't it? It has particular kind of noticeability.
Absolutely. I mean, I've seen lots of things, the age-old thing is send out all the door drops, with a big offer on it and everything, and the challenge is then standing out when lots of people are doing that. But IKEA recently did a great thing where they just had their big offer, but they had it as a little dot-to-dot. Something for someone to play with. They realised that everyone was feeling a bit stressed out and needed to calm down.
So you joined the dots and that revealed the offer?
Reveal the offer, yeah. And it's so simple, and it still is, something very hard-working, something very direct, but it's just far more engaging because they put that little bit of idea in there that someone can play with.
It's very similar. Someone earlier said that, the nice thing about being in creative and direct marketing is you have this stage and you have actually almost more than you do with a TV commercial, more than you do with a radio commercial or with a page of an advertisement. What you can actually put on that stage is simply down to you. And the opportunities for general exploration and inventiveness are actually in some ways less constrained than they are in what are often considered to be more creative media, mistakenly, I think.
Absolutely. I mean, I like to think of it as free-range creative.
Yeah.
Like with a TV ad, you're always told, a 15-second, 10-second, 30-second, 48-sheet, 6-sheet, and everything like that. And, as creative people don't like being told what to do.
No.
They want to run free amongst the meadows of imagination and wonder. And within reason, you can pretty much do whatever you want with mail. And that's what's so exciting. You can send out something that's digital, something that's just a bit of paper, something that's huge, something that's small. You can really do whatever you want. I think that's the opportunity.
I have this one job, I have this one shot, one opportunity. So I'm channeling Eminem there for some weird reason. But you have this one shot at it, and in which you can actually get someone from stage A behaviour to something completely new.
Well, I think that's again, it just comes into flexibility. You have the choice, don't you? If you want to be really sort of pointed and say hardly anything, you can do. And that can be very, very engaging. Or you've got the opportunity to tell a much fuller story. You can use the space, you can talk about more things. And then, of course, it doesn't have to stop there. You can then use it to link on to something digital or, a film experience or something like that. I mean, I've even sent out little tiny DM packs that have got little screens in them. So you can send things out like that and people can actually watch a film and things like that. So there's loads of opportunities, as you say, to either just be very direct, very
not to mention the resurrection of the QR code.
Well, the QR code, absolutely.
The great beneficiary of COVID.
Yeah, yes. Exactly. And then that can obviously link to then the digital experience, which is brilliant.
And so it strikes me that actually using digital to identify an audience and then mail to harvest it would be a very, very sensible combination. But because of probably silo effects, it doesn't get used that way nearly enough.
Yeah, I think the problem is that often it's not thought of as, buzzword alert, an ecosystem and a journey and an experience, I think that sadly mail has become a little bit of the sidekick to digital, isn't it? It's like, and do some DM. Yeah. When actually, when you think of it as part of this journey that people can come in at all different parts, several different times, actually it can tell that bigger story and be much more impactful.
Yeah, and it also, I think, because it's tangible in a way that the rest of the campaign may not be, and because it's permanent, it sits on the shelf. We've heard figures in earlier sessions, typically, kept for 17 days, 18 days. In the case of catalogues, much longer. The complementarity to other media, in other words, its strengths, it's particularly strong where other media are actually weak. Have you come with a few examples of your all-time favourites?
Yeah, I haven't.
That's a tradition of the show, by the way.
So I've got a couple of things, something that's a very, I guess, cheap thing, we'll call it, and something that's then a little bit more expensive. And I like both because they each have really great creative ideas, and it shows that you don't need to spend thousands and thousands, as long as you've got something that's different, that's going to stand out, you can do something really great with mail. So P&O Ferries, they were struggling obviously with the likes of EasyJet and Ryanair, offering cheap flights, and they wanted to encourage people to come and get the ferries. So they had this thought that when you take your car and you go over to, say, France or something, you get more freedom because you can go places, you can drive around, visit more things and things like that. So very, very simple. They sent out a letter, and all it was the type of the letter. It came down normally in a paragraph, and then it just wandered off onto the back of the page, looped around, and then came back again. So ever so simple, just showing that the fact that you have more freedom, you can escape the hotel.
London airport, you end up trapped in one town, one hotel, one city, whatever.
This is it, yeah.
Brilliant.
So it's so effective, and that's a letter. All it is a letter, but someone's just thought, well, how can we twist that? How can we do something different with it? And of course, it did very, very well for them. And then something that we actually did a while ago for O2 was for O2 Business. And they had what's called digital advisors. So if you owned a business, you'd ring up and they would know you by name, so you don't have to go through the whole thing of like, hi, I'm Rory, I'm da-da-da-da-da. They know who you are and everything. And we wanted to sort of make the most of this, and I got told that I wasn't allowed to send a real person out in the post. That's where they draw the line, apparently.
No, they're very strict on that.
Very, very strict, apparently, yeah. So what we did was send out a hologram, and we made it completely personal, so it talked to them by name, knew their business and everything, and talked about all the things that O2 could do. Now, of course, it was quite expensive, but it was sent to the sort of top 10 prospects where, the contracts were absolutely huge, and the ROI was massive. It's something like 13. So it really works, as you say earlier, like if you pick the right people, find those big fish, and then you do something just for them, then it can be really, really effective.
Yeah, and I think the persuasive power and the attention-grabbing power is, in many ways, an order of magnitude better. You don't necessarily need absolute personalisation, just localisation, just that extra little sort of factor 10 relevance that you add to a piece. I mean, one of the most interesting things about personalisation, which I always give as a creative tip, is I said there are two ways you can do it. You can be super relevant, but another very potent way to use it is just to avoid being irrelevant. And there was a test we did a few years ago for Boots where it was a Christmas catalogue. Now, it was sent to Boots Advantage Card members. Most of them, at the time, I think the ratio female to male was sort of 7-1. And so the typical catalogue was covered with, lipsticks, perfumes, etc., female cosmetics. Okay? And the only change that was made was that when communicating to males, you removed about half to 2/3 of the female stuff and replaced it with electric razors and electrical goods and other things that weren't leaning female, if you like. And that made the male mailing, I think, 8 times more effective in terms of its translation into sales. Now, what's interesting about that is sometimes the trick is not being hyper-relevant. It's just avoiding that reason which is not for me.
Yeah.
Simply removing that thing that makes someone go, well, not for me.
I think that's why as well, often people forget that the battleground is if you're sending something out in an envelope, it's that envelope.
Yeah.
It's like an email, it's the subject line. If you can't get someone hooked at that point, if it says, something that's totally irrelevant, you're not going to open it. Or if it's not interesting, then it doesn't matter what your message is inside, doesn't matter, your great catalogue and things like that. You're not getting past the gatekeeper. So you have to make it relevant to that person so they want to go, oh yeah, I'll have a bit of that.
But as well as that, the very tangibility of the thing matters, but also it's a bit more than that, isn't it? There's more than just a sense of touch. You can actually communicate using practically anything.
I mean, I think the touch obviously is a massive factor in it. We are craving physical stuff as we move more and more into a digital existence, let's call it. That sort of being able to touch things, that tangibility, I think, really, really people want that. But you're absolutely right. a poster, that excites the eyes, that's pretty much it. You know, radio is the ears, film you get both, but actually with mail, you can do everything. You can get stuff that tastes nice if you want. You can get things that make noise, of course, looking at it,
the whole
touching
haptic
it.
feedback of quality of paper, etc., communicates without actually overtly communicating. It's very
Yeah,
interesting.
exactly. And I think from a creative point of view, like that then just unlocks so much more potential. Because all of a sudden you've got so much more that you can play with.
Also, it's a medium that really repays thinking about. I always say that the simplest definition of creativity is when you do something better than it needs to be done. You know, in other words, there's a satisfactory, rational solution which, you know, is going to tick all the boxes. Okay, now what you've got to do is beat that. And so, in a sense, the creativity works twice over, I think, because it works in terms of attention and memory, and it also works because it's just intrinsically more effective, because it's different.
Well, that's it. People love to see things that they've never seen before.
Yeah.
You know, you always get that sort of, when you get a really great creative idea, forget the industry, you know, people think like, how do they think of those things?
Yeah.
And people enjoy that stuff, don't they? They're like, oh, you know, have you seen this? Have you seen this?
Well, Jack, it's been an absolute joy. Thank you very much for joining us on Mail Unleashed. And just for the rest of you, just to say, take this learning. It's a lifetime of learning in a wonderful discipline. Use it, and then if you want more, why not visit marketreach.co.uk, where you'll find plenty more interviews like this, and you'll also find plenty more tips and tricks and advice which can really superpower your direct mail effort. So it only remains for me to say thanks very much once again to Jack, a fellow enthusiast and believer in the medium, and hope to see you next time. Thank you very much indeed.